Warning, this content may be disturbing to some audiences. Subscribe. If you dare.
When I notice that she doesn't have a face either. They both begin walking towards me, and at that point I'm pretty damn scared. Hey everybody, welcome to ANECDOSED. People ask Reddit. Schizophrenics of Reddit, what is the scariest hallucination, visually or audibly, that you have ever experienced?
Number 1.
Commenter. I have psychosis and it usually is worse when I'm alone or at night. Doubly so if I'm alone at night. When I was house training my puppy, I had him outside at 3 a.m., and I saw what looked like the KKK and some witches having a seance. I then heard whispers mentioning killing and saw the group start walking up the street towards my house. Thankfully, that's the worst it's ever been. I do still have minor fleeting hallucinations when I'm stressed, but it's more like seeing a shadow out of the corner of my eye and is much easier to ignore. When this event happened, I had been housebound for 6 months, and it still took another 6 months or so before I felt safe enough to start exposure. I literally could not be by myself at first. I had to have someone with me when I left the house and couldn't be in the house alone. I found an amazing doctor and therapist that helped me lessen the symptoms and start working on coping skills. The first day I stayed home for 10 minutes alone was terrifying, and I sat on the couch with a kitchen knife for safety, but I managed it. At some point I realized I did not want to get dragged along on errands and that dislike was more important than being afraid in the house, so I practiced staying home alone in the daytime. I still have issues being alone at night, so my boyfriend makes sure I have company if he isn't home. I also can't manage going into public alone for more than 5 minutes without my service dog or my boyfriend. For a while I couldn't do it even with my dog, but I can manage an hour or so now. It isn't one of those things that you can get past just with willpower. And I doubt I'll be off my meds forever with no relapses. But for now I'm a lot better, and although I'm still considered disabled by it, we just do what we need to do to manage the symptoms. I did take meds for quite a while. My psychosis is part of my bipolar disorder, and I was on several combinations of meds over a few years as well as frequent therapy. I made some life changes to reduce stress which helped lessen the severity of my illness, and I was able to come off my meds under my doctor's guidance. I wouldn't hesitate to go back on if I felt I needed to, and my loved ones know what signs to look for in case I don't act quickly enough. Many people with a serious mental illness are not able to understand they need help during an episode. And depending on the way they grew up, they may not be willing to accept it's even happening due to the stigma of being crazy. It's also really terrifying to lose control that way. There are many causes of psychosis and not all are mental illness, so maybe approaching it from an angle of wanting to make sure nothing is physically wrong could help. I've always been an anxious person. After I was diagnosed, I could see warning signs back into my childhood. I also believe I had a genetic predisposition to it. I was under a ridiculous amount of stress right before my diagnosis, and my doctor said it's possible the combination of stressors triggered the illness to start. For a while I was caught up in wishing I would have done things differently and maybe it would not have been triggered, and I would have been able to graduate college and make new friends, etc. But it would have eventually been something else that triggered it, and the outcome would probably have been similar. Person B, strange, I get psychotic too, and I've seen what sounds like the same thing. I saw a bunch of KKK guys having a barbecue outside of my house and I thought they were coming to kill me and my family for being mixed. Person C, paranoid/anxious here with occasional corner of the eye type things. I think I only get them when I'm already having paranoid bouts. Anxiety is bad, but paranoia is the most debilitating of the two for me. It took me until I was about 13 to understand that those shadows aren't really there and stop checking the whole house for animals or strangers when I see them. Amazing the things you can tell yourself to ignore when you really need to though. Person D. I have the same issue when I'm stressed. It's things look slightly different, like there is a twist on reality or shadows out of the corner of my eye. Once I saw joggers running towards me at 3 a.m., all dressed alike, acting like robots. It's little things that know my brain is like WTF.
Number 2.
I had a psychosis and I would hear other people's voices. I think most people do. For me, the auditory hallucinations were quite mild. For example, when my colleagues were around the corner or at a small distance, I would hear them talking about me in very specific and negative ways. It seemed really real, but often they weren't even talking. I also had a long period of minor visuals, such as fleeting shadows and experiencing a small leaf in the wind as a flying bug. The shadows are easy to know are not real. Because I know that shadows don't work like that, and the bugs were harder, but I just assumed I saw wrong or took a second look. I didn't really have a technique for the auditory. At first I got really nervous about it, but then time after time I noticed that when I looked over they had a totally different body language than would fit with my imagined conversation, or when I moved closer I could hear that they would talk about something completely different. After that I could calm myself knowing that it wasn't real.
Number 3.
Commenter. I'm prone to occasional psychotic episodes. No formal diagnosis has been made to include this. I have previously been diagnosed with BPD, but it's not really common to have episodes of psychosis with BPD, so I'm waiting to be re-evaluated. I was admitted to the crisis ward in November because I was 100% convinced my whole body was rotting from the inside out. I was decomposing from within and it was spreading outward to my extremities. This was terrifying for me, not because I was afraid of dying but because no one believed me that I was decomposing, no one saw it as an issue. And realizing that my reality is not reality was so traumatic and isolating. I'm really not looking forward to the next inevitable episode. Person B. I've never had psychotic episodes, but I am bipolar and I've had anxiety attacks where I am absolutely convinced my heart is giving out and I'm on the verge of death. It's not quite as extreme as rotting, but I think the thought and sensation of serious physical ailments is quite common with panic disorder. Person C. I had very similar episodes of that feeling for about 2 months. I would be convinced that my heart would stop beating while I sleep, so I'd force myself to stay awake so I could focus on my heartbeat. Eventually, I'd decide that if I'm going to die, then so be it, but I want to sleep. I'd wake up in the morning feeling relieved and foolish, but go through the same thing the next night. Hasn't happened in a little over a year, so hopefully I'm done with those thoughts. I feel terrible for people that have to deal with these things chronically. Person D. Yep. Panic disorder. Heart giving out, lungs collapsing, feeling of dread and on the verge of passing out. Chest pain is very common. It sucks so bad, but I've learned to talk myself out of it and focus on steady breathing. And fidgets, I recently got a few and one of them works incredibly well. Shifting focus is key. Person E. I was diagnosed with GAD about 10 years ago and for some reason, knowing I had it made it 10 times worse. Before the diagnosis it didn't seem that bad. After the diagnosis it was paralyzing me. I learned over time that certain lighting triggers it for me. Big department stores, grocery stores, etc., spike the heart rate up. For many years I thought I was going to die 5+ times a week. My work had similar lighting. Heart rate increases, start sweating like crazy, tingling in the limbs. Terrifying. Person F. I also have BPD. Delusions and dissociative symptoms like that are actually not extremely rare in BPD. I have episodes where I get the tactile hallucination that my body is stretching and my arms and legs are millions of miles away, my head is gigantic and empty. A couple of times I believed a creature/demon/thing was trying to possess/control me. I also get paranoid delusions about the people in my life. Person G. I get this body thing, and the opposite, where I'm growing or blowing up, and I can't figure out how my clothes haven't split or how a blanket still covers me, etc. because I'm just so huge. I've actually scrambled out of bed before in fear of suffocating my husband underneath my expanding body. Sometimes, I get them together, so I've got one leg that's basically a barrel while the other is a string of yarn that runs off into the distance. Or my hand is super fat, but my arm is a twig. My head is a golf ball resting on a wide pillow of my neck, etc. My psychics would blame falling asleep, and even though I wasn't always going to bed, recently there's concern that I've got narcolepsy, so maybe I wasn't, but my brain was. I can't afford the testing to disprove or confirm. And if that's the case, I'd prefer to drop into bed asleep and skip the morphing or sit, or be standing, just skip it, entirely. I've had other fairly normal/common hallucinations before that were blamed on meds changing. Person H. I had a really similar thing happen to me in middle school when all of my issues started showing themselves. I'm diagnosed with BPD as well as generalized anxiety disorder, with occasional auditory hallucinations and really minor corner of my eye shadow visual stuff, and I've always had really vivid dreams that are nightmares 90% of the time. I dreamt that I looked in the mirror and my whole torso cavity was all crusty and rotted like the inside of a pumpkin gets when you're somewhere dry, and I woke up so freaked out about it that I was in my bathroom at 4 a.m. with my shirt pulled up and squishing my stomach, trying to see if I could tell if it was rotten inside. I ended up getting an X-Acto knife from my craft stuff and trying to cut myself open, but it hurt too much to do much more than a deepish scratch. I just rode out the panic until I fell back asleep, then didn't realize it wasn't all a dream until I got dressed and had a long cut down my stomach. Mental health is fun.
Number 4.
I have BPD, and I often get insanely dissociative episodes where I feel like two different people. One is manic and very suspicious, very paranoid, and the other is totally calm, so one feels really slow, the other feels really sped up and like 10x speed. In those moments I can hear everything and feel everything.
Number 5.
First off, I just want to say I have hallucinations categorized as psychosis instead of schizophrenia. They do this when your symptoms don't quite line up with / aren't bad enough for the regular diagnoses, and I can tell you I have actually pissed myself in fear from some of my hallucinations. I can't even imagine how bad it must be for people whose symptoms line up with schizophrenia. As for my scariest hallucination, it will always be my first visual hallucination. I was in school, like 10th grade, and I'd heard voices for a bit now, to the point that I was almost getting used to the fact that I hear things others don't. I remember getting up from my desk to use the toilet, and when I got out of the room, I saw this man with no face, just standing there facing me. At first I just thought my eyes were messing with me, so I blink a couple times, shake my head a little bit, and look back. And he's gone. No way he could have moved in those empty, silent hallways without me hearing it, but he's gone. So I just go to the bathroom, thinking it's kinda weird, but not thinking too much about it. I even joked with myself that now I'm seeing things too, haha. But when I got to the bathroom, he's there again, standing in the doorway. I stop and just kind of stare for a second, more curious than anything, then I think, well, maybe he's just wearing a mask or something, and I ask if he can move over and let me in the bathroom, but then this other kid comes out and asks who I'm talking to, right as he walks through the faceless guy. I just stand there, speechless, 'cause what do you say in that situation? The kid looks at me like I'm weird, but then just walks away. The dude with no face moves over to let me by, and I give him as wide a berth as I can while I go in, never taking my eyes off him. He follows me into the bathroom, and a few seconds later this girl walks in, and I begin telling her that she's in the wrong bathroom, I'm a guyfwy, when I notice that she doesn't have a face either. They both begin walking towards me, and at that point I'm pretty damn scared, so I go and hide in one of the stalls and bawl my eyes out, 'cause at this point I realize that I'm pretty much just crazy. I didn't come out until the staff came and talked me into it. The two of them, the guy and the girl, show up every now and again. Note, I've since graduated and moved away from there, but they still show up wherever I am, but they never do anything, so I don't know what to make of it, but that first time scared the living shit out of me. Make sure to share your personal story in the comments below and have the opportunity to be featured in a future video. Also, if you like these topics, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button to continue seeing more content like this every day. See you next time.